Gas cutting and procedure. Safety interview. Questions and answers. Question: what is gas cutting in safety? Gas cutting, also known as oxyfuel cutting or flame cutting, is a process that uses a high-temperature flame to heat metal to its ignition point, and then a stream of oxygen is directed onto the heated area to oxidize and blow away the molten metal, effectively cutting through the material. This process is commonly used for cutting steel and other ferrous metals. Question: safety considerations in gas cutting. 1. Fire hazards. The process involves open flames and sparks, which can ignite flammable materials nearby. Ensure the work area is clear of combustible materials, and use fire-resistant barriers if necessary. 2. Explosion risks. Gas cutting involves the use of flammable gases, for example, acetylene, propane, and oxygen, which can create explosive mixtures if leaks occur. Regularly check hoses, regulators, and connections for leaks. 3. Heat and burns. The flame and molten metal can cause severe burns. Wear appropriate personal protective equipment, PPE, such as flame-resistant gloves, aprons, and face shields. 4. Toxic fumes. Cutting certain materials, for example, galvanized steel, can produce toxic fumes. Work in well-ventilated areas or use local exhaust ventilation to remove fumes. 5. Eye protection. The intense light from the flame can harm the eyes. Use proper welding goggles or face shields with the appropriate shade lens. 6. Gas cylinder safety. Gas cylinders should be stored upright and secured to prevent tipping. Keep cylinders away from heat sources and ensure valves are closed when not in use. 7. Proper training. Only trained and authorized personnel should perform gas cutting operations. Follow standard operating procedures, SOPs, and safety guidelines. 8. Emergency preparedness. Keep fire extinguishers and first aid kits readily available. Have an emergency plan in place for dealing with fires, leaks, or injuries. 9. Equipment inspection and maintenance. Hoses and connections. Inspect hoses regularly for cracks, wear, or damage. Replace damaged hoses immediately. Regulators. Ensure regulators are functioning properly and are not damaged. Never use oil or grease on regulators or oxygen equipment, as it can cause a fire or explosion. Torch and nozzles. Check the cutting torch and nozzles for blockages or damage. Clean them regularly to ensure proper operation. 10. Proper handling of gases. Acetylene safety. Acetylene is highly flammable and unstable under pressure. Never use acetylene at pressures above 15 psi, 1 bar. Store acetylene cylinders upright to prevent the acetone, used to stabilize the gas, from leaking out. Oxygen safety. Oxygen can cause materials to burn more vigorously. Avoid contact with oil, grease, or flammable substances. Never use oxygen to blow dust off clothing or equipment. 11. Work area safety, ventilation. Ensure adequate ventilation to prevent the buildup of toxic fumes, especially when cutting painted, coated, or galvanized materials. Clear workspace. Keep the work area free of clutter, debris, and flammable materials. Fire watch. Assign a fire watch person to monitor the area during and after cutting operations to ensure no fires start from sparks or hot slag. 12. Personal protective equipment, PPE. Eye protection. Use a welding helmet or goggles with the appropriate shade, typically shade 5 for gas cutting. Flame-resistant clothing. Wear flame-resistant clothing, such as leather aprons, jackets, and gloves, to protect against sparks and molten metal. Foot protection. Wear steel-toed boots to protect against falling objects or hot metal. Respiratory protection. Use a respirator or mask if working in an area with poor ventilation or when cutting materials that produce toxic fumes. 13. Safe operating procedures. Lighting the torch. Use a friction lighter or spark igniter to light the torch. Never use matches or a cigarette lighter. Open the fuel gas valve slightly and ignite the flame, then adjust the oxygen to achieve the desired flame. Shutting down. Turn off the fuel gas first, then the oxygen when shutting down the torch. Close cylinder valves when not in use, and release pressure from hoses and regulators. 14. Handling hot metal, hot work permits. Obtain a hot work permit if required by your workplace or local regulations. Marking hot metal. Clearly mark hot metal pieces with hot or use heat indicating crayons to warn others. Proper disposal. Dispose of hot slag and metal scraps in designated fire-resistant containers. 15. Emergency procedures. Fire extinguishers. Keep appropriate fire extinguishers. For example, Class B for flammable gases, and Class C for electrical fires, nearby. First aid. Train workers in first aid for burns, eye injuries, and inhalation of toxic fumes. Emergency shutdown. Know how to quickly shut off gas supplies in case of an emergency. 16. Environmental considerations. Wind and weather. Avoid gas cutting in windy conditions, as it can blow the flame and sparks toward flammable materials. Confined spaces. Avoid working in confined spaces without proper ventilation and monitoring for gas buildup. 17. Training and competency. Ensure all workers involved in gas cutting are properly trained and certified. Regularly review safety procedures and conduct drills for emergency scenarios. 18. Post-operation safety, cooling period. Allow cut materials to cool before handling or moving them. Inspection. Inspect the work area for any remaining hot spots or fire hazards after completing the job. 19. Common hazards and how to mitigate them. Fire. Keep flammable materials away, use fire-resistant barriers, and have fire extinguishers ready. Explosion. Check for gas leaks, store cylinders properly, and avoid using damaged equipment. Toxic fumes. Work in well-ventilated areas or use respiratory protection. Burns. Wear appropriate PPE, and handle hot materials with care. Eye damage. Use proper eye protection with the correct shade lens. Gas leaks. Regularly inspect hoses and connections, and use leak detection solutions.